Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm incredibly excited for what is apparently our first virtual book club. My name is Brooke Berlin for all of you that are joining us. And while I live in the States, I do work across all of Africa. And specifically, what I thought was so interesting about having Micah Springer join us today is that her story, Keepers of the Story, which we have a copy of, it starts with her trek across Africa and then ending in Kenya. And now she is about to move to Ghana with her partner, Oteng. And I work in Kenya, I work in Ghana, I work in West Africa. So Micah and I have been friends for a long time. We were brought together by a mutual friend with a love of yoga. And then we just kind of took it from there with our love of Africa and spirituality and journeying and what that means. And so I thought it was really appropriate, like I said, to start off today with her. So I'm going to turn it over to Micah for a reading, and then we'll have a little conversation about Africa.
Wonderful. So I'm grateful, and I'm a little rusty. I have not presented on anything. We've been cocooning and hiking and just waiting like the rest of the world to see what's happening and when it will happen. So this feels like a beautiful initiation back into the things I care about. So thank you so much for the opportunity. A little maybe summary about where you'll find the section that I chose to read. It's about 10 minutes long, and as Brooke said, this was a journey that took place in 1993, and I was backpacking with a best girlfriend through Africa. We had no plan, we had no mission or affiliation, and we were brazen and very ignorant of so much. And so this particular section I'm going to read to you is from the chapter 2, Culture Shocked. Because I'm a mind-body practitioner, and that's my passion as well, I divided the book into 3 sections, mind, body, spirit. And that was fascinating for me because the mind is so powerful and it's so conditioned. And we know that when we travel, because we're suddenly mirroring all of our conditioning and the preconceived notions and the racist tendencies, or definitely the prejudices. So this was a section I thought would give us a lot to talk about, because the audience is so well-versed in Africa. And so I'm dropping us right in to the continent, and you get to watch my 20-year-old self grappling with everything I've thought and learned. And then we can direct questions to either me or my love, Oteng, and we want you guys to ask anything. We're very
open-minded.
We're open-minded, and we're interested in vulnerability and transparency, because it's how we learn.
And don't feel nervous. We're all here to learn and also integrate. So wherever bothers you, don't worry. Let's put our difference aside for the hour that we will share here and enjoy each other company and learn from each other.
Perfect. Culture shocked. Okay. We knew of one family on the entire African continent. Minnie, the exchange student from Senegal who gave us local money, had insisted on introducing us to this family. They lived in the Gambia, which shared a border with Senegal, and that was all we knew. Our one and only plan was to visit this random, Minnie-endorsed family. Toubab! Kass and I waited with others for the ferry to Banjul, standing midway down a concrete pier line, where we first heard children scream, "Toubab!" They repeated it. We then heard it everywhere, this word for white person in Wolof. People mumbled, "Toubab this," and "Toubab that." It was strange to be talked about as if we were not there, too green to engage in either language or culture. Kass and I stood close in the ambling crowd like art exhibits, observed, commented on, but incapable of contact, of intimacy. We relied on smiling until our cheeks hurt and our teeth dried. People smiled back, but they still said "Toubab." Standing with our bulging backpacks and long, shapeless dresses, we seemed like such a big deal. Wilting white daisies, coming to terms with the fact they'd sacrificed their pots and didn't yet have a replacement. Would we ever matter to Africans? In Banjul, Gambia's capital, we phoned Pasinyani to request directions. He said to take a taxi. It was not far, about 10 minutes. We did not spend Dalasi on a taxi. We walked through the potholed streets that were so narrow our wide backs tilted to dodge swerving vehicles. Diesel fuel spurted tufts of black that hung in the air and filled our lungs. Cars honked. It took an hour to finally round the dirt road into the family compound. Dirt and diesel and foot travel delivered me to my mom's pet name for my sister and I, ragamuffins. I felt ragamuffin all over when we arrived. Black dust covered our hands and feet and stuffed our nostrils. Filth in Eden. The Signani's gardens held so much color and beauty they stunned us. Flowering bougainvillea draped the white stucco walls. Mango and magnolia trees shaded the clean driveway, smelling sweet. Blossoms sprinkled the ground. Pa's wife greeted us. She was tall, her height exaggerated by her blue head wrap and matching Dubiani silk gown. "Oh, you are exhausted," she said as she looked disagreeably over our bodies and turned to call for help, moving like a runway model with her shining complexion, large lips, and sheet white teeth. Two older children came quickly from play and grabbed the packs. Pa's wife showed us to the bathroom first. Two clean, narrow, adjacent rooms, just wide enough to stand in. Both were tiled in white from floor to ceiling without a single decoration, one for showering, the other a toilet. Our room had two beds with mosquito netting hanging like a canopy, and a couple of windows spilled sunlight that reflected the polished concrete flooring. A watercolor painting of hibiscus flowers and palm trees hung next to one. I parted the eyelet curtain to peek out. 3 goats tied to a post wriggled and bleated. Costal dried her hair and whispered, "This place is amazing. I hope we can stay for a week. That warm bucket shower was great. Yeah, I wonder if it's always like this. Busy place. There are people everywhere." I peeked again. A group of 10 adolescents tossed the ball. They have a lot of kids. Someone tapped lightly on the door. "Yes, come in," I said, not sure if it was the ball outside I'd heard. The door did not budge. Cos opened it, and a timid boy said, "Please come and meet the family," then turned and ran down the hall. The games and chaos. Children played near their nannies, adults hogged printed velour sofas, grandfathers and grandmothers, mothers and fathers, aunts and uncles, and friends of the family chatted, and us. 30 or more people fit easily into the large house. Africans do not wash their hands as obsessively as we do, and I have a clean hand fetish. My hand soon shone with the grease of multiple introductions. This was the first time I had been around Muslim people. I wanted to make a good impression of me and my country. I asked one of the women, "Is this common that the family spends time together? This is a really big family." She said in heavily accented English, "Yes, we are celebrating the Tabaski." The Tabaski, Feast of Sacrifice in Wolof, marked the end of Ramadan with the offering of goats, hence the 3 plump goats tied to a post, and a colossal feast known elsewhere as Eid al-Adha. In West Africa, every family, even the most penurious, saved for a goat. The Signani's jubilation sharpened the dread that Kas and I felt. Eventually, we would have to explain our strict vegetarian diet. Of course, we'd landed on the continent just in time for the mass slaughter. The Signani's goats bleated outside our window, devouring a feast of greens and grasses. Kas and I wandered the compound, not certain what to do with our clean selves. Kas's bright complexion finally gleamed, the grime now banished, to the diesel-riddled road. People went about their business of play or preparation and left us to amusement. Walking in the garden, we neared the entrance of the house. 3 elegantly dressed women sat on tree stumps in a stuccoed courtyard, their clothing too rich for such rough chairs. Their slender black fingers picked stones from jasmine rice and flicked them to the ground. I admired the tightly woven plates they held on their laps, so well used, still colorful. They tossed the rice into the air, softly blew the hulls, and recaught the rice. The rhythm repeated. The bright silks flowed like easy conversation. Cos, don't you think they're beautiful? The way they sit together and just do things? They always dress so nicely, I said without taking my eyes from the scene. One woman set down her plate and called for us to join. She gave Cos her stump and disappeared in search of another. We each received a pile of rice. They showed me how to distinguish between rice and stones and use my fingernail to scoop out debris. They taught Cos to blow hulls using a steady stream of breath, not too forceful. We worked and felt useful, eavesdropping on the mix of heavily accented English and Wolof. My printed cotton skirt hung next to the peacock blue silk of a young woman whose laugh reminded me of waterfalls. The women's eyes flashed with friendship. Cos and I had time to venture from country to country, sample myriad African cultures. It appealed less to me suddenly. I felt and wanted to feel part of something. I wanted to sort the stones in jasmine rice, world without end. More than 50 people gathered at Pa's home, inside, outside, laughing and singing. The traditional tinny-sounding music started to pulse. I avoided going out for fear of seeing the slaughter. Well, for fear of interaction, which pained me after my blissful hours sorting rice. Outside our window, people floated and shimmered from the light of the festive lanterns hung about the compound. Through the eyelet lace curtains, I watched our first African celebration, which was so loud we never heard the cry of Abraham's sacrificial goats. Everyone seemed so comfortable, so ripe with participation, so unlike me. I once took a personality test and came out an ambivert, 50-50, introvert, extrovert. I considered this as I settled into my canopied cocoon. I'll spend more time with people tomorrow. Tonight I'm tired and need the rest, I thought, gritting my soul's hard little teeth. My desire to connect could bring me all the way to Gambia, but not beyond the walls of my room. Truth is, I don't know how to belong. Or maybe I wasn't yet desperate enough, still too close to my own culture in time and memory. The following morning, we tried to make amends, but for what exactly we were not sure. Pa's household man washed the goat's blood from the driveway with buckets of water, while Pa stared into the distance, savoring the detritus of festival, paper lanterns and colorful confetti littering the ground, and the quietness. Cos came with me this time. Pa, thank you and your family for this beautiful opportunity. Cos and I have never been to Africa nor experienced anything like the Tabaski. As I tried to move into his line of sight, he rotated and shifted his gaze. I lost ground with each footing, so I settled on looking at what he looked at, which seemed reasonable and certainly grounded. I wanted to convince Pa that we were good people, interested in his culture. And this was true, but we'd failed a giant test. No party, no shared holiday celebration, no sacred meat. I stood next to Cos, wrestling this moment with its awkward emotions, staring at our feet. Yes, okay, you must tell your parents you are safe, Pa said coldly. This was all he needed, for us to assure our parents that he had done his job. Cos and I stepped back, dismissed. Now we really were on our own, with no other contacts, and the continent seemed suddenly enormous. At the end of the 4th day, we said farewell to the Sinyani household. We left them with gifts, took the ferry from Banjul back to Senegal, and found an expensive hotel in Dakar with much needed privacy. We did, however, pick up our outfits from the tailor before leaving, and now we had African-style clothes. The colorful wax fabric sparkled, tropical birds and flowers lit in the sun. I even had a head wrap made, but still felt a little too self-conscious to wear it. On the ferry back, I sought Kas's take on things. That whole thing was weird, wasn't it? I asked. I'm not sure what to think yet. Yeah, culture shock. Ours or theirs? Theirs. Our culture shocked theirs. I laughed. I'm sorry, Kas. I messed up the only relationship we had on the entire continent, chasing Pa around his driveway. We bent over laughing, holding the ferry railing and our bellies. No more fish soup, Kas said. No more slaughter party, I countered. We might never be invited to see the inside of another family's home. How American, how un-Islamic. Kas's anthropology degree shook its finger at us, while surprise blackened her already thick eyebrows. I touched where they wrinkled right between her eyes. Maybe Pa had eyebrow envy. She laughed, a mighty dose of spirited glee, and we released the rift that we'd caused with the Signani household. We tucked our African-style dresses between our knees in the hot wind. I watched the outward fanning waves of the ferry's engine. I later asked a kind Islamic man how I had gone wrong with Pa. He said, as a sign of respect, women avoid eye contact with men, even their own husbands. They never begin a conversation. They wait, sometimes forever. He smiled thinly.
Amazing, thank you. I always get so many questions in my mind when I'm listening to you. So I have a couple that I'll start with while we see if other people have any questions that they want to ask as well. But even just from that reading, so you and I first started talking about cultural appropriation before we started today. And I think it's so perfect, actually. You spoke about your dress in Senegal. I'm actually wearing a dress that I had made from a designer in Senegal. And we've had so many conversations about what it is like to travel through Africa, to be in Africa, and to be very, I think, honorable toward the culture that you're in. So you mentioned, different religions. You mentioned that you are a vegetarian going back to live in West Africa, very meat heavy. And I know the two of you are planning on going to Ghana and really trying to work on bringing a level of spirituality into a very religious culture. Will you speak a little bit about those things together, about what you're going to be doing in Ghana and how you're going to take kind of your non-West African beliefs to West Africa and be in Ghana and have all of those things come together?
Do you want me to start or you?
Yes,
Start? Well, I guess the truth is, I don't know. I can't even quite imagine how much this move will shift me and demand of me. And I'm looking forward to that sensation of just being unfamiliar, new, everything, learning the language. Twi is what I'll be learning. And figuring out, again, this question of belonging. Because isn't that what we talk about when we talk about cultural appropriation, or how do I practice my faith and belief amidst a very diverse and distinct grouping of very religious, I guess I would say, organizations. So all of that, I'll speak for myself first, but I'm trying to stay as open as I can to whatever comes, and fully recognizing that it will be a big shift for me and for our relationship. But I'm just so darn excited about it, because I haven't felt, this is going to sound strange, but I haven't felt uncomfortable in my skin in a long time. And I think it's necessary for us to do these things that are risky and uncertain. And so we have shipped a container of the things that I felt like I definitely wanted there. I've got, and mostly it's funny, it's like books and incense and the smell of pine resin, because I use that a lot in ritual and ceremony. So, you know, a shipping container, really, Micah? And I mean, it is full of other things like other people's vehicles. But it does have all of the things that I think will help me adapt and will give me a place to come back to. Together, we have such a beautiful, I guess, belief. I mean, for instance, Josephine Oten is a vegetarian like me, and you just don't find very many West African vegetarians. So that was a complete surprise. And then our version of spirituality is aligned. So there's some really wonderful ways that we can come together, I guess, and then just see. But I'm really going there to learn and to be stripped again of the conditioning that occurs from living in a place of privilege and comfort.
And I like that you actually just called Oten Josephine, because I know that Oten, you go by a couple of different names. And then Micah, you said that you're going to be learning Twi, but Oten, you're Akan. Can you tell us a little bit about the Akan culture, about your language, and why you'll be speaking more Twi than Akan, and possibly the meaning of your names and why multiple names?
I'll start with the names. Actually, most people that live in West Africa, some people have adopted Christianity and Islam. And based on that, they name them after those kind of religion, Christianities and Western and Middle Eastern. That's why you hear somebody by name Muhammad and Joseph, Ali, and John, Peter. But we have our own culture and names for everybody in African tribe. So my name Oteng is an Akan name. If you translate that to English, it's like somebody who is like a humble and a decent person. And Ababil is a name, I was named after my great-grandfather. So Ababil is like a reincarnation of my grandfather. So they name me after him. And usually they do name people after good people. So let's say you have a child, you usually don't name your child after you. You rather name your child after your grandparents or your auntie or somebody who has contributed a lot to your family. So it's just kind of a reward and respect for the people who have done good for the people in the society. And then they have something called English name. So based on your religion or your affiliation, they name you. That's why Peter, John, and different kind of Christian type of names comes in line. So my culture is the Akan people. We reside in Ghana, and actually we were from the old Ghana Empire before the Mali and the Sogan Empire came to exist. So there was a little bit of civil war, so we scattered around West Africa, and vast majority of the people reside in Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire and some part of Togo. But you can find a lot of Akan or related people all over in Africa. And we have a society called like, what would I say that my term, patriarchy?
Oh, matriarchy.
Matriarchy society. That's how we thrive on matriarchy society. So what it is like we look up to our women and respect our women a lot, because for you to even become a king or a tribal leader, you have to be crowned by the queen mother. So we have very like a modern type of society in our bloodline, and a lot of people, we cherish our women and we protect our women. And, you know, as compared to different places around the world, you can tell the vast majority of the people, they have father and son. If they pass the monarchy to fathers and son, but we don't do that. It's from a brother to a sister's son. So we're very kind of a little bit unique. And I think most of you have been around that area of the world, so you can do a little bit of research. And Ghana alone is not just Akan people. There's vast majority of different tribes in Ghana. They have the Molo Dagon in the north, the Dagon and the Gomba, Kusasi, Mamprusi. So it's kind of a melting pot. And we have learned to live in a good um, peace and harmony with the different tribe. We have adopt different people culture. And speaking of culture, what I'm wearing right now is a outfit from the north. It's a different culture outfit. It's not my culture, but I adopt them so much that I wear some of their clothes and they wear mine too. So like I say, a melting pot. We enjoy each other. We live in peace and harmony. We celebrate each other. And it's very interesting and very nice and benevolent type of lifestyle that I'm grateful to be part of.
I love your culture and your lifestyle too. I've had a wonderful time exploring Ghana. So Gail has a question for us, and I love it because it's actually one of the questions that I had as well. And that specifically, can you, Oteng, tell us a little bit about what it was like for you to come to the States? Why did you choose to come to the United States? What was the assimilation like for you? Why are you now choosing to move back to Ghana and make a life for yourself there with your family?
Yeah, you know, human being, it has been part of our life. We like to travel and move around, and we are always hungry to learn each other culture, to experience different lifestyle, different category of people. Just as like Europeans, like a lot of people travel from Europe to come to the New World in America. It's in our culture and also DNA. We like to move around. That's people. So growing up, I heard about United States of America, and I was very thriving and dying to come up here to experience the culture because of the Western ideology in Africa. We see America on the news, everybody enjoy, everybody adore America. And it was like, oh, okay, I have to experience this and come up here and see how America is. So as a young man, like every young man, we like to move around, like I have been saying. So I try to come up here and to enjoy the culture of United States of America. So I came up here, did my part, learn, study, and integrate. And I learned, oh, that's enough for me. So it's time for me to also go back and also admire my culture and enjoy it. So that's what is prompting me and pushing me to go back and enjoy my culture.
How long have you been in the States?
I've been up here for almost like 13 years. Yeah. So it's been a while.
You've seen a lot of changes as well.
Yeah, a lot of dynamic changes, good and bad. So it's all part of us. That makes us very happy and very grow and learn.
So speaking of cultural appropriation, one of the things that I think, especially in the US, we've spoken about for a long time and question is yoga, but from India. And Micah, I know from your time in Kenya and watching the Maasai, you actually created an entirely new kind of form of yoga. Can you speak a little bit about your experience with the Maasai, what you saw of their bodies and their movements that you wanted to then kind of bring back, and how that shifted and changed your practice and what you offer?
Yeah, I guess one thing I remembered is even before I had started a yoga practice, Kos, the girlfriend that I traveled with in 93 and 94, we were always, the perspective that we had was always from the athlete and for our body. And so before I even had ever heard of yoga or tried yoga, I noticed when we were traveling on that trip that people moved easier than we did. And I remember it shocking me because we were supposed to be in the prime of our life. We're 20-year-old women. We're in fantastic health. We're very athletic. We can compete in all of these different, and yet I couldn't move like I saw people moving. And you know how in the streets you'll see people dancing, and you know, and this is older people. And so that really was probably the first impression of, I need to figure out what that is. Is that self-consciousness? Is that just not having it mirrored back to you? Is it literally like inflammation and diet? I mean, it just, you know, it could go down the rabbit hole. So that was the first impression. And then my sister and I, Desi, who really is the one that should be credited with founding the Bowspring. We traveled in 2004 together, and we were looking specifically at the curve of the lower back, and had been taught that the spine should be straight. And when we watched specifically African posturing, we recognized that no, it's actually curvy, and the curviness lends itself to the freedom of movement and the flexibility. And so that really inspired us. We started talking about it. We started talking about the specific role of the glutes, of the butt muscles, and how they're meant to mount upward, not fall downward. And that in turn supports the lower back, which then extends the spine, and you have kind of this double S shape that really moves in that serpentine way. So the Bowspring is the kind of yoga that we practice, Josephine and I practice, and we're just grateful that they keep teaching it.
So a question from Amy. She hasn't finished the book yet. She's at the point where you and Cas have just met the warriors on the coast. Are the two of you still friends, and do you both still adventure together?
We do. So Cas and I would have been, we're in 2020, so it was 2018. She went back for the first time. The family that I befriend at that moment, that Amy's talking about, and then that continues through the end of the book, they're still my family. So I go back and see them either once a year or twice a year. I'm in constant contact and communication with them. Apaya and Natsiyon, my mother and father there, are still alive, which is incredible. They're in their hundreds. And Apaya is the last living Samburu man of his entire generation in the entire tribe. So he's got that kind of clout and stature. Cas and I are still great friends. We're going to see each other, as a matter of fact, tomorrow, and she's going to give us a send-off for whenever this inevitable relocation to Ghana occurs. And I adore her. This was something that forged a deep friendship because of all we experienced together. And even though we had about 10 years where we sort of fell out of each other's lives, she had moved, I've just always really cared about her. So yeah, highly recommend traveling young with best friends, because they tend to stay that way.
Last year, I was actually working on an itinerary with someone who was putting together a trip that was Ghana and Kenya. And it's nice that there's a direct flight that connects the two. So you get both of your homes very accessible to you when you are back in West Africa. That's and right. Going over to Kenya. Yeah. We've also spoken a lot about the Samburu and about northern Kenya, because I work with a property in Laikipia, which is right on the border between kind of Maasai and Samburu. And we spoke a lot, especially during one of the more severe droughts that was taking place. And we've both seen a lot of deforestation in Africa. In Kenya, also deforestation is happening in Madagascar. I mean, just unfortunately, the continent around. Will you speak a little bit about what it meant for you to print your book on 100% recycled paper, and the challenges that you came across? I think especially because we have so many people here who are avid readers, I was kind of astounded to hear how challenging it was for you to be able to accomplish that.
Yeah, the book, one of the overarching messages is about this rekindling of a relationship to the earth and the choices that we have to make. And I was quite naive as a first-time memoir writer, that I just assumed we were already making that choice of recycled fiber, because I've known for a long time that it's ample. And then only to learn that it's actually not possible. So I didn't ever find a publishing house that would work with 100% recycled fiber for memoir genre specific. There are a few. There's like 3 publishing houses, or there was in 2017, but they're more specific, kind of like organic gardening, and we'd like to print this book on recycled paper, etc., etc. I did, however, just read the overstory, and I'm missing the author's name right now, but he went to bat, and he's a maybe 12-time novel, Pulitzer Prize, multiple New York Times bestseller list author. And he had requested 100% recycled fiber because the nature of his book is about trees. So it is happening, but it was not happening when I was trying to publish the book. So I found a printing press that would do 100%, and then I self-published, and I ran a Kickstarter just to get the word out there. And I used it kind of as an educational platform to teach people about how easy recycled fiber is to source, and gave all of the stats on that, and why ebooks are still not in comparison as sustainable or ecological. So it was difficult, and that saddens me, but at the same time, I feel really good about the choices I made. And I did have to turn down a major publishing house. And sometimes I still wonder, people said to me, just go with them and then use the sales of your many books to plant trees. But I just felt like that choice has been done. And if we're not going to make the compromises that are necessary, we can't really feel good about it in the end. So thanks for asking that question. It was central to the process.
Yeah. And Jean actually commented, every time I turn the pages of the book, I'm struck by the feel of the paper and how lovely it feels. So it's a good choice for you to stay true to yourself on that and everything in life. And I think the book, the author you were referring to is Richard Powers.
Yes,
Richard Powers. And then
wonderful book.
A question from Tina as well, who hasn't fully finished, but I know has been listening to it for a while. She would like to know how you define culture, and what does culture mean to you? And that can be for both of you.
Yeah, right. We should really, I think that is the question that's up right now, which I love that we're having to grapple with. The section in the book in the reading where I talk about, I didn't really know how to belong, because we come from a culture that has really praised our individuality. And we're meant to stand out from the crowd as opposed to merge with one another. Our homes are separated, and we often don't know the neighborhood that we live in by the neighbors. And so it was a very different immersion where suddenly everything was about the collective. And so I would say that I am very guilty of, if you'd like to call it cultural appropriation, so be it. But I borrow from the many things that I found. I have Celtic crosses on my walls. I have Mayan calendars. I have Egyptian Isis idols. It's just like I just pick and choose. And in a way, that has become my culture, which means a lot to me, because I guess I didn't feel like I fit into the one that I was born into. And I also am not African. I'm very aware of that. I'm not trying to be, and yet I'm going to go there and represent who I am with this lovely man who accepts that and loves it. So I think it's a really good time to ask all of those questions, and to also notice that we're in a quickening of evolutionary intention. So the fact that culture is evolving very rapidly before us through the different movements that are critical, it's a really fascinating time to be alive and to stay sensitive in our borrowing and honoring of what we borrow, and fully recognize that there's something that we also decided to sacrifice in doing so. Complicated, great question. Thank you, Tina. culture to you, love?
Yeah. So me and Micah like to discuss some type of sensitive issues. And if I remember, I was using my own experience to teach her to understand. Sometimes some people doesn't know and they're not aware of those kind of things. Like me, myself, grew up in Ghana. And where I grew up is like a homogeneous society, which is like a vast majority of our country have the same kind of things and everything. And there was different people from different tribes from the north that live over there. I thought they were all happy because if there is a festival, we all celebrate together, we enjoy and everything. But when I came to America and I started learning and looking into myself, and I started telling Micah, oh, I feel so bad. I didn't ask my friend and ask him, how does he feel? How is his heart? How is he feeling? I was thinking and assuming everything is normal and everything is okay. I never doubt. So I was telling her, it's okay that some people don't know, like, culture bias and racism and those kind of things doesn't exist. It's okay. They don't know. Let's help them to learn and grow as everybody. So we talk about that and it was very helpful. And I'm grateful that we have this platform opportunity to discuss this and share ideas, to learn from each other, learn each other culture, and live in peace and harmony as human and enjoy. It's very grateful. And I'm happy that you give us this opportunity.
I'm happy you accepted.
You're welcome.
There's just a comment that I'll read to both of you from Jean. I sometimes feel torn taking on parts of other cultures as if I'm stealing from it and I have no right to do so. I agree with Micah in that sense. It's complicated. And I think all of us feel that, especially those of us that love a culture that is so vastly different from the one that we were raised in and possibly even spend our time living in. So here's another great question. And I'm going to actually ask both of you to answer this as well. Krisney's question, or her statement in question, is: your parents were so brave to let you travel so early on your own. What kinds of things did your mom teach you that made you feel like you could follow your passion of travel and culture? And I think that that would be a great question for both of you to answer.
Do you want to start?
You start first. My queen.
I still think my mom was absolutely nuts. And I'm so grateful that she was. It was not without a lot of suffering on her part, though, because it happened to be that I have a sister, Desi, who I mentioned before, and that's all. So it's just the two of us. And Desi happened to be in Argentina at the time when I was in Africa. So my mother went through this really terrible sensation of empty nest and very, early on. And this was also when I was traveling in Africa before the internet, before cell phones, before the easiest ways to communicate. So it made it that much more difficult in that she would only hear from us sometimes every 2 months. And when I think about that now from the perspective of I'm going to be 49 in a month, how would I feel if I had children and I didn't hear from them and they were God knows where for 2 full months, no word. And I just think, how did she do that? And so I can only really answer through her, and having heard her answer this exact question at some of my readings. And what she said was, I just knew that it was her destiny. And how are you going to stand in the way of that? As much as she would have liked to for safety and the prudent choice, she didn't make it. And I'm very, very grateful. My father, he was very different in it, in that he was a little more checked out and a little more like, well, okay, kiddo. And then they've both been with me, traveled there now, and they've both just really marveled at my ability to speak the languages and how comfortable I am. So I think they got to see that their hardship that they endured while I was away for that year has really paid off in creating the fulfillment that I enjoy now as a woman. But yeah, tough.
Yeah. It's not an easy thing, like to leave what you grew up with, what you have been learning, and being familiar with, to go to a different part of the world to experience different culture, different lifestyle and weather and everything. It was a little bit difficult, but I learned to accept that as part of human nature. I'm here to learn and grow, and it's part of how to migrate, move around, and experience different culture, integrate, and learn from each other. But I learned a little bit about America in school, so I was kind of a little bit naive about how it is up here, about amendment, freedom, and democracy and everything. So on my side, I was a little bit, like I said, naive and assuming everything is what they said in the books. So I was very excited coming up here and thinking, oh, this is way out easier. So, but when I came up here, I learned that it's a human culture. It's everywhere, and it's not what you see or read. Yeah, so you have to be careful of everything. Sometimes there could be a little bit of lying and deceiving in those kind of things that you study. So, like I said, a young man and too energetic and happy and coming to America and freedom, all this amendment, you have free to choose and pick and do everything. What I didn't also realize is like, as a human, we have choices and free to make everything that we want it to be, but there's certain things that is not worthy or necessary to like follow suit or choose. So anyways, it was hard on me, and it makes me who I am now. And I'm very happy that I went through those things, and it has opened me more and have me become the person I am. So life is a moment of collections. The collection that I have collected or accumulate has made me a different person, and I understand human nature and growing and loving.
It's beautiful. Thank you. A question for you, Micah, very specific on the writing process from Amy. You really captured the voice of a 20-year-old experiencing this journey with wide eyes and innocence. Was it hard not to inform your writing with the years that have passed, your personal growth and change of attitudes regarding white privilege, keeping your writing voice authentic?
Yeah, it was difficult. I would, and it's one thing that I asked the editor to pay specific attention to, and I worked with a really wonderful editor, Barb, and so she would kind of stop at certain places and say, "Did you know that then?" Because the other thing I will say about myself, because it's been said to me since I was tiny, is that I did come into the world with a certain amount of wisdom, and so it was difficult to figure out how I had learned and grown versus how I landed on the continent. And I just remember the feeling in my body of finally settling and really being there. And it took a long time. It was kind of 3 months, I think, that Cas and I were traveling, that we had a lot of fear, and we had a lot of preoccupation, and our minds were busy, and we were stressed. And part of it was that we were traveling on I want to even say it was a fraying shoestring budget, quickly unraveling. And so a lot of it was like mindful of, oh, we could spend that, or we could spend this, and this often required that you really dig in to your sense of self. Figure out how you were going to make it. So the writing process, yes. And then I also, to be fair, because the smells and the sights and everything it was important to me that they were vivid. And so when I would go back, I would inform the writing from there. It wasn't that I remembered all of that detail from that 17-year gap. Yeah.
I'm going to combine a couple of questions about Ghana. So I just know that Oteng, his family, has a cacao farm farm in Ghana. And so when I was speaking with Micah, I said, where are you going to go and what are you going to do? So I'm going to combine these questions now. When you go back, will you be in the same area as your family, starting again without family right beside you? Do you find that there is prejudice in Ghana? How will a white person fit into the culture? So speak about, again, your plan for going back to Ghana and what that will look like for you with your family.
Yeah, my family are very welcome and integrated people. They've traveled a lot and they have experienced different culture. Like I said, Ghana has its own melting pot, different culture, different tribe. We living together in harmony and peace. And it's going to be hard because it's just Micah is going to be the 1% of the Ghana population. So basically, in a certain way, she's going to experience some kind of a little bit of misunderstanding because people get nervous when they see foreigners. It's up here. Sometimes you experience a little bit of somebody who doesn't feel like you don't belong here, and somebody would think, why are you here? What's your purpose? And based on our past and history of like exploitation of some part of Europe and Europeans, so people see foreigners, especially white, they get nervous and say, what's the mission? You see here, because as you know, you've been in Africa, there's a lot of missionaries, people that are spreading Christianity, Western ideology, Western culture. So people will be a little bit skeptical and ask her questions, uncomfortable questions. And some people don't know how to frame, they'll just be a straight shooter and ask you, what's your purpose? Why are you here? Where you live in your country coming up here? I had numerous types of questions like that. Even not long ago, some man who lived not far from where we are right now asked me, what's my purpose here? What brought me to America? Where am I from? So basically, as you know, she's 1%. So she was definitely going to experience those kind of things. And we would stay with my parents. They have like a nice house that we will stay there for the meantime to be able to establish before we move. We don't want to rush and make decisions. We just wanted to explore the place and find a better place that will suit our mission and our purpose of going over there. Then we can integrate from that. So that's it we have now in the pipe.
One of the things that is important to both of us is preserving the forests. And it's a double-edged sword, cacao, because it's a really wonderful superfood and the world loves it, and the world loves chocolate. But at the same time, they cut down a lot of old growth trees in order to have these cacao plantations. So one of our main goals is to find pristine rainforest and then buy a bunch of it up and put it in a trust. And then that, as long as the government holds and the legality is sound, then it will be something that we can kind of preserve, and then we'll speak on that. So we'll let people know this is what we've chosen to do, and you can also do the same. So it's just spreading of information. Maybe we will teach bowspring, and some of the philosophy that we share. That's one of the ideas. I'd also like to continue writing. I think I'll have a lot of material. Not that I don't right now, I still do. And I would love to write another book about that journey. Yeah, so we've got some plans, but we really have to we want to see how everyone receives us and what we can learn from them and then go from there.
Yeah, I'm excited. You said you're about 2 hours west of Kumasi, which is a big town in Ghana, where there's an amazing festival. And so every time I go back to Ghana for that, I'm just going to shoot on over and say hi and spend some time with you out there in the rainforest.
Very welcome. Yeah.
So as you're looking to pick up and write again, this would lend itself to another question. Are there other cultures outside of the African continent that also interest you or that you have explored, I'll go on to say, and want to write about, or will it always focus mostly on Africa?
Oh, I'm such a student of life. I love all cultures, all languages. If you know astrology, I'm a 9th house sun. So that's kind of my whole reason for being here is learning about other people and recognizing myself in them and them in me, and then also celebrating the places that were very different and learning to respect that. So India, Africa, I love South American culture. I don't know. I think that Africa just holds, it was my first initiation into the unknown and grappling with fear and prejudices and the conditioning of mind. So I think it holds a certain place in my heart, and certainly the family in Kenya is dear to me always. And I feel so grateful to finally that quest for belonging that I was looking for in the passage that I read, to finally feel like I truly belong, where when I show up, it's a big deal, but only in that it's such a tight embrace. They've really welcomed me in with such fullness that nothing is hidden. It feels very real. We can speak about absolutely anything. And to be that vulnerable and that accepted is really a lovely gift that I've been given. So yeah, I'm not sure. I will hopefully let anyone know who's interested that I've written something else.
And I think that's actually a beautiful segue then, because we don't have any more questions. If people do have questions, of course, please write them and we'll still answer them. But I had also asked Micah if maybe she would leave us with one of her poems, because on top of writing books, she also writes poetry. And so we're kind of at the on the hour. If you'd like to go ahead and send us off with a poem of yours, that would be lovely. And if there are more questions, please ask them. And otherwise, then this will be the final word from Micah.
So I thank you for asking. And I do love poetry because it is so succinct and can encapsulate so much range of emotion when done well, which is what I'm striving to do. And this one is very personal. It's about us meeting and how bizarre and synchronistic, and really that's a story in itself. I am writing an article for the New York Times Modern Love, so if it gets accepted, I'll let you know, Brooke. But it's really about our beginning. And so this is a poem. Let's see, I called it Waking Beside You. Ours didn't begin with, so what do you do for a living? We began with, what does it sound like when you pray? We lay in the impossibility of generations, healing, divides, unfathomable depravities, my great-grandparents to yours, your black-muscled body so supple on gold sheets, as I unravel the mystery of me for you, your ears in part created to hear my remorse, my deep apology, for pain I do not remember inflicting, and my ears created for your majestic forgiveness. I cannot atone for the unspeakable, yet I will live beside you, trying. We speak softly in the not quite morning light about Lodwa, the orphan who saved my life with her dark pleading eyes, or illnesses that might have claimed me if I weren't already meant for you to find later. You speak in imperfect proverbs and send smiles through the teeth gap, telling me the history of your scars and the meaning behind the letters of your name. And here, in your warm arms, poetic whispers weaving us tighter, a full day before us, there seems nothing more possible. He's my biggest fan for poetry. Yeah. And he gives me such accolades that I don't really even have to publish.
Your muse and your audience at once.
I'm so full. Yeah.
We actually have another question. So sure. I'm going to read that for you, and we'll just kind of keep going as people have questions. And for those of you that need to go, of course, we understand this is all still being recorded.
Yeah, thanks.
So I'm going to read it in full. The information from me is that the two of you hope to open a small community center in Ghana where people can freely discuss matters of importance, revitalizing the rich culture of Oteng's ancestors. If you had the same desire to do that in Colorado, what would it look like? In times of confusion and divisiveness in the US about white privilege and Black oppression, do you have ideas or suggestions about bridging cultural and economic gaps in the UN shared history? Might be the US shared history.
Phenomenal question.
And an unshared history. Sorry.
Yeah. Do you want to start?
With my experience, me myself, I started like the logistic business. I used to work at the airport, and there's different majority of people that work over there. People from Afghanistan, different places, and they have like the American dream initially in their heart, and when they come up here, they have some kind of odd culture that they were born into, and that's the only thing that they speak and know about. And when they come up here, it takes time for people to isolate or evolve from what they have known since the beginning of their life. So it takes time, and some people see them and they look like it's kind of strange. So like me, myself, like I said, I live in a society that has a vast majority of people living over there, and I didn't really ask my fellow people how they feel, small tribe that live in vast majority of Akan people territory. I didn't ask them. I thought that we are all okay. But when I came up here and learned, so I used that experience that I have to be able to like mediate between like some people, because I quite remember I had a friend named Ashkwala. He was a very nice person from Afghanistan, and he worked with the US militaries in Afghanistan, being an interpreter. And he has his phone that always sounds Allahu Akbar whenever the phone rings. And he worked at the airport. So anytime that sounds comes over, that's the time that he's supposed to go play. He's a very hardworking people. Everybody look at him with his sneaky eyes, was like, what are you doing? So I have to tell people, you know, this guy is a good person. You have to be close to the person, talk to him and see his mind. You don't assume or judge. That's one thing. And, you know, as a human being, we like to assume. You see people and you just assume something, and you could be right or wrong. So sometimes you have to be open and ask and, you know, discuss. And being the logistic business, I happen to drive a truck, and I go to different strange places around America. And the trucking industry is a lot of like white males. And some of the people, they don't like minority, because they were born in a society that have taught them that type of culture. I always say it's a culture, it's not a DNA that they grew up into, and they don't know anything. That's what they know. And that's the only thing that make them feel comfortable about their suffering and oppression. But at the end of the day, as a human, we are all in the same boat. If we are suffering, we are all suffering, because we are all connected and we are all the same people. And here, I have tried, and Micah have tried, and we have discussed and have a little bit debate about trying to help people to understand each other's point of view and not undermining each other, and we live in harmony and peace. Me and her also has discussed about the race issue and the tension and everything when all these George Floyd incidents were thriving and everybody was talking about. And there are certain things that she didn't understand, and I didn't understand, and there's certain things that I didn't understand, and she did. So we like, and she's taught me, and I learned from her, and I taught her, just like, oh, I never knew that, and I didn't think like that. And I was like, yeah, and I also myself didn't know like that. So we need to talk to each other, put our differences aside, in open heart, and not having a stigma or anything attached, just free soul and free spirit, and share ideas and talk. So we have been doing it, and it's very grateful and very exciting.
What I'll tell you about him is he's so forgiving. In the trucking industry, he did travel to some very racist places and was confronted with a lot of that. And he was able to sit with so many people and start to inform them about who he was and what he really cares about, and bridge. He's an incredible bridge. So what I've enjoyed about our relationship, and then I'll talk a little bit about if we opened something here, what would that be like? Because I think there's ample need, and having places where people can come together and discuss. One of the things that I did early on in my yoga career was facilitate through yoga and through meditation young Palestinian and Israeli girls. And it was through an organization called Seeking Common Ground in Colorado, a very lovely organization. And it was so helpful to have the body, even if you're not, when I talk about yoga, I'm not talking about these advanced, amazing postures that are certainly beautiful to look at and acquire, they require a lot of practice and commitment. I'm talking about letting the body be the wisdom guide and being able to ask it questions. Where do I feel uncomfortable when you talk about that? How does it make my throat tight? Why does it make my throat tight? What am I afraid of? Well, what I really want is this from you, et cetera, and facilitating those kinds of conversations. And it's just interesting. Our initial ticket to go back to Ghana was April 26th. And so that was all before a lot of the overt racist protests were happening. And so I'm really grateful to be here at this time. And I sort of am remorseful that we don't have a center in the States, in Colorado, because I'm not abandoning. A lot of people are like, oh, good time to get out. That's not how I feel. This is my home. I'm from Colorado. I love Colorado. And we will certainly come back. And I care about this conversation in particular. I've cared about it most of my life. And now it feels like it's more possible to have it, but it's also very messy. And I think giving people and organizations a lot of space to mess up and then say, I'm sorry, just like in a good relationship. I messed up. I was thinking this, it came from a smallness in me, and I promised to do better. That's what I want to do. And I want you to give me the feedback on that too. I think that's what we're looking for from each other, but it has to be tender. It has to be gentle. And I'm not talking about protecting white fragility. I'm just saying we are going to make mistakes. We're going to say the wrong thing. And right, always. And it's kind of like to Bob, like these people just yelling at me to Bob. And at first I was like, should I be offended? They're just like, white person, look at the white person. And I just felt like as a 20-year-old idealist, I was like, that's not okay, is it? And then it was like, oh, it actually kind of is okay. And I suddenly, I just realized that's part of their culture and how they're interacting with me. And I watch Africans bite their tongues now too, because it's changed a lot in the 28 whatever years since it's been. So I'm watching like this PC pussyfooting, walking on eggshells behavior that we're all sort of adopting. And I just hope we keep trying. I just hope we keep trying, that we come together, we share the space. I think it was John Wayne or someone like that, Roy Rogers, but he said that he never met a person he didn't like, just somebody he hadn't spent enough time with. Thank you, love.
But I think that is absolutely the most brilliant way to end. Thank you both so much for your time, for sharing your heart and your spirit and yourself. Just really so special to spend time with you both today while you're together here in the States. And we send you off with love. And I think you have a whole list of people that are going to come and visit you sometime soon as well.
I hope so. Please, micahspringer.com is a great way to get in touch with me always. And we'd love to hear from you. I always like talking about the book just because it's a very central part of, I think, who I am. And I love it when people relate. So, Brooke, you're amazing. Thank you. Love you.
I love you, Micah. Thank you so much. Thanks, Oteng.